This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by Linode, high-performance cloud hosting for everyone. Visit linode.com/MacVoices and take $20 off your first server package. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. In the first part of our discussion with Jeff Carlson about snapshots, we developed a very strange analogy involving my living room furniture as a way to explain how snapshots work and what they can do and how. We continue along with that analogy and cover some additional information that will help you understand what snapshots are and why you need to pay attention to them and what they can do for you. So we're back to the conversation with Jeff. So
maybe I shouldn't be so surprised.
Well, then let's go back to where I sort of took us off track a little bit, and we'll keep going with the analogy. So somebody took that chair that I burned in the backyard and stored it somewhere else in my house. That means it's taking up space in my house, in the basement or the attic, or who knows where. So same question here. What are we talking about size requirements or size utilization with snapshots?
Yeah. No, that is a very good question, and I don't have a really good answer. Partially because like one snapshot, like your first snapshot will be sizable, and I think it depends on what you have on your drive, how much disk space you have. Like I can't just say, oh, it's going to be 20% of your free space or 30% of your free space. And a lot of that is just because, some of it is actual data. Most of it is just pointers to where things exist now. Or, let's say you move a file to another directory. So that file is not getting duplicated and then put into a different spot in the snapshot. The snapshot just knows, oh, yesterday at 2:00, this file belonged to this directory, and like nothing's actually getting moved there. It's just sort of updating the pathways of what it's telling you of where something exists. So so in our analogy, like someone made a copy of that chair. All right. Let's say you didn't burn it yet, right? Somebody made a copy of that chair, but it doesn't actually exist as a physical copy because your chair still exists somewhere else. And as soon as you burn burn your chair, then that other copy becomes real. Wow, I hope I'm saying this right. But yeah. So then you burn the chair, that copy magically materializes as wood, and you say, oh, I need that chair back. And you open the secret door, and there's your chair. However, if a certain amount of time has gone by, and you're like, I don't need this chair, or it's been several days, it's highly unlikely that I'm going to need this chair, or you what's trying to extend the analogy here. You attached your RV, which is your time machine backup. You attached your RV to the house, and then all the stuff that was in that back room got shifted to the RV. Then all of the stuff that was in the back room is no longer there, and then you have your free space again. No,
that's a real good way of looking at it from the way you from the way you described it before, and to take the analogy forward. So what I think I'm hearing you say is that a time machine drive was pretty much essential before, but now it arguably is more essential.
It kind of is.
And I guess I'm thinking of it from two perspectives. First of all, for keeping those snapshots safe, because let's face it, if your SSD fails, I mean completely, snapshots nor anything else are going to bring it back. Right. But also from the idea that it sounds like my magic chair is going off to the RV. So I'm saving space in where the magic chair was in my basement. It's now out in
Yeah.
the RV. So now by connecting that time machine drive and letting it offload stuff, I'm saving space on my drive while extending the ability to recover should something go wrong.
Yes. That's exactly it.
Well, that's all the time we have today,
We've
folks.
solved everything.
Yeah.
Yay!
and I'm off to buy a magic chair.
Well, I mean, one of the interesting things about this, I should also point out, because so snapshots do take up space, and I wish I could just tell you how much they take up, but it's going to be highly variable, how much data you have, the type of data, et cetera. What you also run into is if you have to run disk first aid, so you think something might be wonky with the directory on your disk, so you're going to run disk first aid. Disk first aid like checks all those snapshots too. So where before, in the HFS Plus days, you'd run disk first aid, and it would, depending on how fast your drive is and how much data you had, it would take a little while, but not a really long time. With APFS, if you have a dozen snapshots, it could take 3 or 4 times as long because it's scanning each one. It appears that under Catalina, First Aid does that faster than it was in previous versions. I'm not exactly sure why, but that's just been my experience watching it happen. And so, like, there's just some overhead knowing that, okay, if I'm going to run First Aid and if I have snapshots, this is going to take a while. There is a way that you can manually delete snapshots if you want. And so this is actually what happened when I mentioned earlier, like I would run into a situation where like the drive in my old computer was just way too full. And I needed like what I needed to do was just go through and cull some things out. But of course that takes time, and I had something more pressing that I needed to put on the drive. And so when I went like even though the Finder told me that there was plenty of space, when I would try to do the copy or the install, I can't remember which one it was, it just wouldn't let me do it. And so what I had to do was basically go in and delete some of the older snapshots that were still hanging out. And then, that actually freed up space. There's a utility, I was looking for it here. And of course, now I can't remember the name of it, that lets you Daisy Disk. So the utility Daisy Disk is one of these that lets you sort of map out how your disk space is used. And one of the features that it has is it will tell you how much space is being used by the system. And you can kind of drill down a little bit into it and find out how much of that is snapshots. It's like that would give you an idea of how much physical space it's taking up. But because of the way APFS calculates free disk space, like it's always kind of a moving target.
So I think you started to say, I think I heard you start to say that, well, and correct me because this one's really important. Should I manually remove snapshots? And if so, how? To get, like you said, to get something on the drive that I really need there, as opposed to I'm going to take the risk of not being able to go back to yesterday at 2 a.m. or last week.
Right. You should not, but you can. So only in the sense that you are taking a risk, right? So you're removing backups. If you have a lot of them, I don't see a problem because you're just basically saying like, I only want to be able to go back one day. I don't need to go back 2 days. And so maybe delete some of those older snapshots. If you are in a situation where you just cannot have enough free space, even though the Finder is telling you that you have enough free space. That's when it's time to look into deleting snapshots. Our friend Glenn Fleischman wrote an article for Macworld actually a couple of years ago that I reference, that tells you how to do this. And basically, it's all done in the terminal, and you list the snapshots like I mentioned earlier, and then you would type sudo to give permission to your actions, and then tmutil, which is that same command, and then delete local snapshots. And you would then type the name of the specific snapshot you want, and then that would delete it. This is a little bit of terminal monkeying, and that's totally depends on your comfort level. But that's what I ended up having to do when I ran into that situation where I needed the space right now, and I was willing to take the risk of getting rid of some snapshots because what I had done over the past few hours or few days wasn't something that I felt was something that I could lose forever, or that was that important. So it's definitely it's definitely like not really a last ditch action to take, but it's certainly don't say, oh, I need some more space on my hard drive. I think the first thing I'm going to do is start deleting snapshots, because then you're kind of monkeying with what the operating system is doing as part of its just normal housekeeping, basically. But that option is there as a possibility.
Okay, now, folks, I want you to listen very carefully and don't do what I'm about to ask Jeff if I can do. But Jeff, the common wisdom is for most people to stay out of their library folder, because going in there and manually deleting things, you can really do some damage to your system and everything. So I'm guessing that what I'm hearing, I think you say, is that if I'm going to get rid of snapshots, I should not go in and try to search them out using Daisy Disk or any of the other utilities and rip them out and drop them into my trash manually. I should probably go through the terminal process so the system knows that I got rid of them.
Yes, because actually, and I would have to go double check this, but I'm pretty sure, like these snapshots, you won't see them as files. They're not in the library folder. They just exist at the sort of terminal. The terminal is the way to access them. I don't believe that they are user viewable or user surfaceable, if that's a word, in the Finder, just because there's such a background process. And so you would have to use the terminal to get rid of them. I believe Daisy Disk does have a way that you can specify them, and I have to admit, I haven't opened it recently enough to know this off the top of my head, but I believe that you can say, delete some of these non-essential system files. That actually sounds worse than what it is, but delete some of these basically it thinks of them as cache files. I think it has the ability to do that, but it's actually a little easier to do it more precisely using the terminal. And I say that as somebody who, all my life as a Mac user have said to myself, I really should use the terminal more, and I really don't. I just am not a terminal person. I'm not a command line guy. I can see how I should be, and I just am not. So, so for me to be saying, oh yeah, go to the terminal and just start deleting things, it's not that easy. But that's kind of the best way to do it because it's more precise, more surgical.
This edition of MacVoices is brought to you by Linode, your solution when you need a virtual server in the cloud. Use the code MacVoices to take $20 off your first purchase at linode.com/MacVoices. Whatever you're looking to do online, you can build it on Linode. But not just build it, Provision, secure, monitor, and back it up too. Linode is a full-service hosting operation with 10 data centers worldwide, including the latest in Toronto and Mumbai. And Linode isn't just a hosting operation. They are a world-class hosting operation with SSD storage, a 40 gigabit network, and industry-leading processors powering their servers. If you know what you want, you can dig right in, or you can let Linode do the setup for you with their easy one-click installs of a variety of servers. Find out what Linode can do for you by visiting linode.com/MacVoices and using the offer code MacVoices to get $20 off your first purchase. That's linode.com/MacVoices and the code MacVoices to take $20 off your first server. It won't be your last. Thanks to Linode for their support of MacVoices. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that I won't speak for snapshot files, but I think Daisy Disk, I think something like Grand Perspective, or any of these other utilities that let you see the files, will let you zoom in on the file, but also I think that most of them have the ability to delete that file if right from their interface. Now, ordinarily that's probably not a big deal if it's in your documents folder or your downloads folder, but monkeying around in the library folders, or certainly at this level, is a bit of a different animal.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, from what I can tell, if you're deleting snapshots, you're not going to cause irreparable harm to your computer. It's just limiting your ability to go back and either retrieve data or move your computer back to a state where it was before. One example of a practical example of this is when you run a system update. So you're going from 15.1.2 to 0.3. The OS will make a snapshot, and then you apply the update and you realize something's gone horribly wrong. Maybe Apple goofed on something, and you're like, okay, well, how do I get back? Well, the normal way of doing that is you have to erase your drive and restore from a backup that you had made before that update, like a manual backup. Here, you could just roll back to the previous snapshot. That's,
But you're rolling back to the snapshot of the system as it was then. So if you just finished your budget for the year in the intervening time and you roll back, that will disappear.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you did that, store that file somewhere.
I mean, it's for documents like that, you would probably already have some other location for it, or you would run a time machine backup, or you'd run a like an actual physical duplicate backup. This is really more for, okay, I've installed the update and macOS won't completely load, or it's hung on the login screen and there's no way I can get around it. Then what you would do is you would restart, load into the recovery partition, run first aid, or run the restore. Sorry, not first aid. There's a basically time machine restore command in the recovery, and then say, I want to go back to this snapshot. And so then that would roll you back to where you were, 20 minutes before. But it's not something to just sort of be cavalier and say, oh, you know what? I don't need to make a backup because I can go to a snapshot and, everything will be fine. Trust me when I tell you this, because it happened to me where I was cavalier about a system update, and I thought that I could just roll back to something. And to this day, I don't even know what it was, but there was something in the system that just would put my computer into a loop, and I had to build up from scratch. So, don't be the person who is like, I don't need to do a time machine backup right before I do this update, or I don't need to update my duplicate because, it's a dot release. So whatever. that's when the universe likes to, smack you in the head and say, you should have made a backup, buddy. So snapshots helps in that regard, but maybe not all the time. Like they're designed to help in that regard.
Yeah, well, I think we've all.
I just sent mixed messages, didn't I?
No. I think we've all had one of those experiences where you do a shortcut. A shortcut is a whole nother thing. But you make a shortcut. You think you're right. I've updated the OS 10 times. It won't be a problem. And darn it, that's when it grabs you. So you have to do that. So is the only way to access a snapshot or take advantage of the benefits of a snapshot through the Time Machine interface, or do you know of any utilities out there that or is there no reason to have them because it's built for Time Machine?
No. So I know that Carbon Copy Cloner will let you access. Well, wait, before I say that, so I know that SuperDuper will let you specify a snapshot to make a backup to. So like if I wanted to just update my duplicate of my hard drive, and normally you just say backup now, and it takes the current state of my hard drive and puts it on my external SSD that I use as a emergency duplicate. But if for whatever reason I say to myself, there's something weird going on here, I want to update my duplicate, but I want to update it from a snapshot from yesterday, then you can specify that. With Carbon Copy Cloner has the same feature, and I say this as not someone who's used Carbon Copy Cloner very much, but I believe they also would let you basically do like Time Machine and go and find a file. I'm not 100% sure on that though. But otherwise, I think it's I don't know of other utilities that take advantage of snapshots, but I also don't think that it's so arcane that they wouldn't be able to.
Okay. But for just a stock Mac OS system, Time Machine is the way to go.
Yeah. I mean, they've basically taken the Time Machine interface and used that as the mechanism for accessing this data.
Okay. So we kind of started out with this, and I want to as we head toward wrap up, I want to make sure folks do understand this is not a backup. You need a separate off your computer backup, preferably 2 or 3 in 2 or 3 different locations. I like I utilize Backblaze as my online backup service. That way I've got all my files out there. No, I can't boot from my Backblaze backup. That's not the point, but all my data is safe. I personally want to clone, and I've said this a million times on the show. My data is absolutely critical. There's no question. But what to me is at least as critical is my operating environment, my production environment, because I have everything set up exactly the way I want, with everything across the top menu bar the way I want. And if you lose that, you will take weeks. You might arguably you will take longer to rebuild that than you will some of your data files. So you absolutely have to have that.
I've absolutely been there. The time that I mentioned when I basically had the catastrophic failures of like my backup system, I had missed at some point. I had realized that my duplicate was older than I thought it was, and I was like, "Oh, I've got a Time Machine backup." Well, Time Machine backup is great, but you can't boot from it, so you have to erase, reinstall a bare vanilla system, and then build on top of that, and that's when you say, how much is my time worth? My time is actually worth quite a lot, because I spent the better part of a week just getting back to status quo, which you don't want to do. If I had been the smart person that I pretend that I am and just updated my duplicate right before I ran that update, then I would be able to say, oh, something went crazy wrong, I can just boot from that duplicate and use that to basically duplicate the data from the duplicate onto my internal hard drive, and I would have been up and running in a day, maybe a late night. But no, I am here to to be your example sometimes of this is what can happen, and you don't want to be on the other end of that. So Snapshots helps a bit.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate this because we've been laughing a lot about it, but I hope we've given people a little better understanding. I now have a much better understanding of what it is and isn't, and what it can do and can't do. And frankly, I'm like you. The one thing I don't do often enough is connect a time machine drive, and so now you've just taught me that needs to be a priority, because I tend to prefer clones. Okay, I've got multiple clones, and so if I have to roll, not roll back necessarily, that's not the right terminology, but restore from a clone, right. I can do that, and I can even restore maybe individual files from a clone. But this would be obviously a whole lot easier if I need to do that individual file thing, and it's one additional level of security that Apple has given you for free. So why wouldn't you take advantage of it?
Yeah. One thing that I am not certain about that I need to investigate is if you make a duplicate, a clone, I don't know if the snapshots that were on your original drive are also copied to your clone, or if the duplication process is like, well, you don't need snapshots because you're just making a thing here. So that if let's say my hard drive dies, and so I boot up with my my duplicate SSD, would I then be able to go and revert to a previous snapshot? I don't know.
Completely anecdotal. I think that's one of the issues I had when I said about the bad experience. I think I was cloning from one drive to another, and I believe it was with Carbon Copy Cloner, and it was one of those like, well, okay, my hard drive is supposedly this size according to what I can see in the Finder, and it should have plenty of space over here, but it says it doesn't. Now there are a number of reasons that could have happened, but that's kind of my. And if you're doing a clone, I mean, I would hope that if I'm doing a clone, I'm getting everything. I mean, that's a whole nother discussion we can have about, whether a clone is truly a genuine clone, but I would hope that it is in this case.
I would also hope the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but hope
great.
is not
now we have
something
homework.
Yeah. Exactly. So you get into this and we've talked about take control of your digital storage in previous shows, but you get into a lot of this along with a lot of other issues in the book. And so if this hasn't made as much sense, or if you have questions, the first place to go is that book, and then contact Jeff, and he can talk to you about your living room and your magic chair and your RV and everything else. Jeff, as always, I want to make sure we let folks know where else you are when and doing things, and what other projects you might have in the works that you can tell us about.
Yeah, well, basically, go to jeffcarlson.com. That's the best place to find stuff about me and links to the stuff I do, stuff I can talk about. Well, I'm working on an update to take control of your digital storage. That we're going to be fleshing out some of the information there. Yeah, that's all I can actually talk about right now.
Well, I know one other thing you can talk about, and that is some of the free training you did for Luminar that is out there on the web, which I thought was really, really interesting.
Oh, good. Thank you. Yeah. So because I recently released a book on editing photos in Luminar that we talked about on your show. I've done a couple of webinars that just sort of walk through, how to do some of these edits. The first one that I did was basically just, here are some of the features, and here's a lot of the AI features that Luminar uses. And then the second one, really based on feedback from people who watched the first one, like they wanted something more advanced. And so the next one just talks about layers and masks and some of those things that, I would say 60% of the people who use Luminar don't necessarily need to know about, or they may never encounter. But when you do know about how it works, it just opens up a lot of different possibilities and different, creative possibilities, and just, it expands your capabilities. So those are also at jeffcarlson.com. Check them out. They were a lot of fun to do. I hope we do more. And then at Jeff Carlson on Instagram, at Jeff Carlson on Twitter, Facebook, but I don't really feel good about pushing people to Facebook sometimes. So I don't post as much there in terms of, the work that I do.
Yeah. And Photoactive, of course.
And Photoactive, of course. Thank you for being my brain today on the things that I've been. So Photoactive is the podcast that I co-host with Kirk McElern. Comes out every 2 weeks. We've had some amazing guests talking about photography and the Apple ecosystem, and we have one coming up soon that we're revisiting printing. And, we talked to Rick LePage, who has been in the Mac community for, I think, as long as there's been a Mac community. And like the stuff he knows about printing your photos is just amazing. So it was a really good episode coming up, talking to him about, like, how do you choose what to print? Why should you even be printing in the first place? So, so I have a lot of photo related stuff, but then also take control of digital storage. And then I also recently published Take Control of Your Apple Watch. So I feel like I have to move different pieces of furniture in my brain to be like, oh, are we talking about photography now? No, we're talking about the watch. We're talking about storage. This is the great thing about being a freelancer, because I can just tackle all sorts of interesting things.
Thank you for letting us know about the discussion with Rick LePage. That's a topic that I'm very interested in. And you're right. I mean, if you've been around the Mac community for a while, you know Rick's work. So that I'll really look forward to that one. Thank you.
You're welcome. That should be out June 5th.
I have to wait till June 5th?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, darn. Okay. Hey, Jeff, really, thank you so much for taking the time, because this is I'm sure it's been a bit of a brain dump for you. And I hope that folks understand Snapshots a little better.
Yeah. It's a weird technical concept that, like I said at the beginning, a lot of people don't even have to think about it. But if you find yourself in a situation where you do need to think about it, you're going to be glad that it's there.
Agreed. Well, whenever you have a new project that you can talk about, come back. We'd love to have you.
Sounds great. Thank you for having me all the time.
It's always a pleasure, Jeff. Thank you. Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is Mac Voices. I learned a lot. I hope you did too. I feel like I have not been taking advantage of the capabilities Apple is giving me, because I didn't fully understand this particular one. So, as Jeff said, now we've got homework. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with Mac Voices magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.